Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Wild Werewolf. Are you ready to embark on a wild and thrilling journey into the world of werewolves? Here, we'll explore the untamed nature, the raw power, and the captivating stories of these mythical creatures. So, get comfortable and let's unleash the wildness together. Werewolf Forest to Chapter 12 WH What? How much did Danny tell you exactly? Well, nothing really. I up and did everybody. I turned to see Connor standing in the middle of the massive tents, calling to his pack. Pack everything up. Let's head home. A mix of sighs, groans, and cheers flowed through the air. Everyone began to take down tents and roll up sleeping bags. We'll talk later, Andrew assured me as he ran off to help. It only took about half an hour to take down the small camp. Some people were tying some of the luggage around their furry pack members, while others were coordinating defense patrols. Everyone had a solemn look on their face, but it was shadowed by determination, like they were trying to take their minds off their sorrow by putting themselves to work. Or planning their revenge. Here, carry this. Andrew handed me a backpack. While you're here, you might as well pitch in. He smiled at me. God, had I missed that smile. I smiled in return. Let's go, everybody, yelled Connor as he shifted and ran off, the pack following. Stay close to me, Andrew said, giving me a serious look. I nodded my head and we set off after Connor. We ran, zigzagging this way and that, for hours on end. We eventually arrived at a clearing and my mouth dropped. There, in front of me, was a house. A real house. I hadn't seen a house in months and maybe even a year. I had only slept in tent after tent after tent. Maybe they even had beds. Maybe that was too much to ask. Is this where you live? I asked, hopeful. Yes, he replied simply. I stood there and took in my surroundings. The house was more like a collage dorm. I could less see the multiple rooms through the many windows. It was very modern, the architecture incredibly artsy. Almost the entire ground floor was made of glass, the windows reaching easily 6 feet high and 4 feet wide. Inside was a living room with multiple couches and a pool table, and a kitchen with every appliance known to man. It had at least 3 floors above that, all pretty similar. There were multiple windows, some had drapes blocking the inside from sight. There was a small dirt road leading from behind the house and disappearing behind the trees. It was possibly the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. The front yard was crawling with people. Men fully clothed for once and women mingled and talked like it was a high school campus. Wait. Women. Come to think of it, I had seen a lot of girls already. Last night, the person that had yelled at Andrew, that was a girl. I had seen them all around camp when we were packing up. Why hadn't I noticed? I guess my mind was on other things. Some people from our party ran up and hugged some of the people that were standing around. Some walked solemnly up to each other and embraced them, beginning to cry. It was a jumbled picture of sorrow and joy. The laughter of the lovers meeting after wondering if they would ever see one another again mixed with the mournful cries of those who had lost theirs. One girl ran up to us and looked around hopefully. Her face dropped into a worried and panicked expression as she ran over to Connor. He turned to her. Max, my fated mate. Lights flashed at me and my wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. She asked, close to tears. Connor shook his head. I'm sorry, Rain. Her face turned into one of absolute horror, like someone had just told her she was sentenced to death. No, she muttered no. She ran off, her arms wrapped around her chest as if trying to keep from falling apart on the spot. I looked up at Andrew, expecting him to explain the girl's actions. He looked down at me with sad eyes. Her life mate died. What's a life mate? I'll explain later. I saw another girl running towards us. Unlike the last girl, she had a look of relief on her face. "Andrew," she called. Her curly brown hair bounced with her as she all but hopped to Andrew. She rammed into him and embraced him in a big bear hug. "Hey, Seth," he said, returning the hug. "I'm so glad you're okay," she rejoiced. "Where's Ellie?" she said, nervous. "Somewhere around here. Last time I saw her, she was talking to Nick." I stood there awkwardly while she breathed a sigh of relief in his chest. She turned her head, resting her temple on him. Her eyes that were glowing with relief flashed to curiosity. "Who's that?" she asked. "This is Maggie," he answered. Her eyes widened. "Maggie, as in Maggie. Maggie." He nodded his head. She looked at Andrew, waiting for him to explain. He just mouthed later. She nodded and turned to me, a giddy grin plastered on her face. "Hi, Maggie. Andrew's told me a lot about you." "I'm Cecilia, but everyone calls me Cease." She stuck out her hand for me to shake and I jerked back instinctively. It had become a habit in Danny's camp of horrors. She pulled her hand back, confused. "Skittish, isn't she?" Her smile faded as she looked up at Andrew. He stared into her eyes for a moment before her confused expression became one of realization. She looked back at me with her earthy green eyes glinting with sympathy. "Well, I better go find Ellie. See you guys later." She flashed a warm smile my way before running off. "Come on, I'll show you your new room." He grabbed my hand and led me into the house. The front doors opened up into a hallway that had a big staircase in the middle. You could still easily see the outside because of all the windows. He led me up the stairs and to the right, down another hallway. The walls of the hall were completely bare of anything but white eggshell color wallpaper. He turned and faced a large wooden door that was there except for a small white board. It read, "Eli Sheva." He opened the door and pulled me inside. There were 2 beds, each at the other side of the room. One bed was covered in a dark purple blanket and sheets. Posters of movie stars and singers plastered the wall beside it. "That one's yours." He pointed to the other bed. It was covered with a plain white sheet and had a blanket folded neatly at the bottom. The walls above it were bare. It was obvious that no one had slept in that bed for a while. "I'm gonna go get Connor. Stay here." And with that he left the room, shutting the door behind him. I sat on my new bed, rubbing my hands back and forth on the alien fabric. It seemed so strange to me, to be in a real room, sitting on a real bed with real sheets. I lay on my back, letting my stiff body sink into the soft mattress. I clasped my hands together on my stomach and stared into space. The doorknob clicked as someone opened the door. Assuming it was Andrew and Connor, I didn't bother to move. "Who are you?" a startled voice asked. I jumped up from the bed and faced the person. A young girl stood there, a black duffel bag flung over one shoulder. She was maybe a few years older than me, though she seemed older in some way, as everyone here seemed too. Her waist, long brown hair was pulled back in a ponytail, though some straight endril still hung in her eyes. Her eyes were both dark-colored, though one had a green tint and the other blue. A small rim of soft amber rested around her pupil and threw its thin tentacles out like a setting sun. She stared at me intently, her strange eyes narrowing. "Well, I asked you a question." "I'm Maggie," I said, hoping she would already know about me as that other girl had. "Oh, so you're the girl who woke me up last night," she said, her eyes softening. "Sorry about that," I chuckled. "It's cool. Everyone has their bad nights, right?" She smiled as she put her bag on the purple, and what I assumed was her bed. "I'm Eli Sheva. If you didn't catch that from the sign on the door, but everyone just calls me Ellie. So I guess we're going to be roommates now, huh? I guess. Well, you can do whatever you want to your side of the room, but don't touch my side, okay?" It sounded like more of a demand or request. Okay, great. Now, just a few rules. No food in the room. I don't want bugs in here. You take care of your side of the room and I'll take care of side of the room, and you can't bug me if my side is dirty. I'd lay down the house rules for you, but Connor normally likes to do that. I nodded. Good. If you don't bug me too much, we'll get along just fine. She eyed me up and down. You got any cloth, Skid? She nodded at me, indicating my lack of shirt. I shook my head. She unzipped her nag and grabbed something out of it, tossing to me. You can keep that. I don't really like it anyway. I lifted the black T-shirt up to see crisscrossing lines of neon color decorating the front. I slipped it over my head thankfully. It fit. Thanks. No problem. Just then I heard someone knock at the door. Yuck, called Ellie. Ellie. It's me. I recognized Connor's voice. Ellie opened the door to reveal Connor and Andrew, standing side by side. They were both now wearing shirts. Connor a baggy gray pullover and Andrew a dark blue t-shirt. Can we speak to Maggie in private for a moment, please? Andrew asked. Yes, sure. I'm hungry anyway. Ellie slipped between them and headed down the hall. Andrew and Connor entered the room and closed the door behind them as I sat on my bed once more. They both sat on Ellie's bed. Well, Maggie, Andrew has informed me that you have a few questions for us. Yeah, just a few. I mentally scoffed. Why are there girls here and not in Danny's camp? Better to get the simple, less important questions out of the way first. Well, there are girls in Danny's pack, there are just very few. It is completely possible that there wasn't one in that particular camp. But anyway, there aren't very many girls with Danny because the girls tend to come to our side. There are many different theories on that. Personally, I think it's because we have a closely knit family here, not a military force where the lower soldiers are expendable. Girls tend to like the feeling of family. I nodded my head. That did make sense. In the short time I was with these people, I could see the connections between them. They loved each other. They were a family, unlike Danny's pack who were scared into obedience. Why are you and Danny's pack fighting? What did Andrew mean by the human race being exterminated? What's really going on here? Just. Explain. My hated Nate. Legs splashed around me and my wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. Cutter sighed. Okay, well, where to start? Essentially, there are technically two types of werewolf, other than a vodus, of course. There are pure blood werewolves and there are turned werewolves. A pure blood is a werewolf that was born of two werewolves. A turned werewolf is, well, what you are. Someone who had the gene and was bitten. There's really no difference. But Danny thinks so. Since he's a pure blood, he thinks he is entitled to more than everyone else. He believes that humans are insignificant and wastes of space. He doesn't think much better of turned werewolves. What he plans to do is turn every human that has the gene and kill all those who don't. That way, in a couple of generations, there would only be pure bloods. We are trying to prevent that from happening. My eyes widened as I tried to take it all in. He paused, waiting for my next question. I took a deep breath, knowing there was more to be explained. How did this all start? I mean, did you just stumble into this and find out about Danny or what? No, I've known about this from the very beginning, since Danny and I were young children. You see, Maggie, Danny is my brother. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 13 alrighty. Well, not much to say other than thanks to all my fans out there and that you guys are awesome and I love to read your comments, yes. I read all of them and thank you so much for all your support. So, down to business. The vote goal for this chapter is 55 votes by next Wednesday 5/5/10. You think we can do that? All right, great. By the way, I love to read comments, so if you have something to say, don't be afraid to say it. Or if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask and I'll answer them. As long as the answer won't give anything away, of course. Oh, and if you haven't read my poems yet, sorry to keep bothering you about that, please do. Just go to my profile and click on the little links, okay? Thanks. Okay, nothing more to say. Except we have a new character in this one. Welcome to the story, Davo. Your brothers? I asked, astonished. I looked at Connor again. Now I knew why he looked familiar. His strong jawline, his brown eyes. He looked like Danny, yes. Danny is my older brother by 2 years. He said that as if he was confessing to having a wart on his toe, like it was the most disgusting thing in the world. I remember once, when I was maybe 10, he came home covered in blood. My mother, of course, freaked. But when she found out it wasn't his blood, she was absolutely furious. When she demanded he explain himself, he simply said, "He called me stupid." He looked down in disgust. He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Like it explained everything. He was referring to the boy down the street, Jimmy Tangway. He was only 11. He shook his head, revulsion for his brother's deed clear on his face. And what made it worse was my father approved. I remember that night. My mother and father were screaming at each other. Then, close to midnight, my mother stormed into my room and started packing my cloths into a suitcase. I asked her what was going on, and she said that we were going to go on a little vacation. Just the two of us. Then my father burst into the room screaming about how she couldn't take me away from him. She said she wasn't going to let him corrupt me like he did Danny. He said that I should decide. I can still see his face. So angry, so shocked, when I said I was going with my mother. About maybe 3 years ago, we had heard that Danny formed his own pack, recruiting everyone he could. About his plan. I decided I was going to fight it, so I got as many people as I could. Friends from the werewolf community, cousins, humans who knew about me, anyone. But unlike Danny, I gave them a choice. Danny used threats, bribes, or just stripped some poor innocent human out of their life and dragged them down with him. Like what he did to you. He glanced up at me through his long, dark eyelashes, his warm brown eyes glinting with sympathy. We began to branch out, sending people to recruit any rouge they could find. We now have packs all over the world, but, unfortunately, so does Danny. It's a good thing my mom is independently rich, or feeding and housing my pack would have been a lot harder. Because our pack was so tightly knit and so close, we could fight better and more efficiently than Annie's. It seemed like we were going to win, but then he found James. It's impossible to defeat him, and whenever it seems like we're going to get even remotely close to beating them, he brings out the big guns. I couldn't count the people I've lost to that sick bastard. He sneered. Andrew took one look at Connor's despondent face and stood in front of me. I know it's a lot to take in, Mags. Come on. He grabbed my hand. If that's all the questions you have, I'll give you the grand tour. He gave Connor a sad look as he led me out of the room, with Connor still sitting there, staring sorrowfully into space. As Anders showed me the house, I realized just how big this place was. We stared at the top floor and decided to work our way down. The top floor was mostly just housing about 15 double bedrooms, except for the library. It was small, about the size of one of the bedrooms, but it was enough. I knew I would be spending a good deal of my time in there. I missed reading so much. The second floor was, again, mostly rooms except for the bathrooms. Apparently there were only 2 bathrooms in the whole house. I was shocked at this until I saw them. They were huge and resembling the locker rooms at a high school. The showers were in little stalls with curtains, and there were multiple toilet stalls. A long row of sinks spanned from one wall to another. The next floor down, the floor my room was on, had nothing but rooms, so we just continued to the ground floor. The ground floor was larger than the upper floors, or at least it seemed that way. One room was a rec room. Many couches and armchairs were scattered throughout. There were coffee tables with magazines and books on them. A pool table and a foosball table took up the remaining space. The next room I was shown was the kitchen. It had 3 refrigerators and 2 stoves. There were too many drawers and cupboards to count. I guess that's what it took to feed an army of werewolves. Blue, marble counters rimmed the walls, and there was a matching table in the center. A metal rack was suspended above the table with pots and pans hanging from it. Well, that's all. Andrew said as we walked away from the kitchen. What about that room? I asked, pointing to the only part of the downstairs that didn't have large windows. That's the infirmary. You sure you want to go in there? I nodded my head and began to walk toward it. Well, here it is, Andrew said as he opened the swinging double doors, a hint of sadness in his voice. I looked around at the cots filled with injured people. Some had bloody bandages wrapped around all parts of their bodies, while others had limbs in casts and slings. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. I noticed one boy in particular, though. He was lying perfectly still in a bed, his jaw tight and muscles coiled. He didn't seem to be badly hurt except for an arm wrapped in a bloody bandage. But what really caught my attention was the fact that he was blindfolded. I returned to leave, but I held his arm. Max Spidey, I faded Nate. White splashed around me and my wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. I walked slowly over to the boy. Maggie, Andrew said in a warning tone. I waved my hand dismissively at him. As I drew nearer to the boy, I noticed his wrists were chained to the bed. His hands were clenched into fists, as if ready for a fight. Who's he? I asked. They found him among our injured members. All the others from Danny's pack were either dead or had left already. He was just lying there, though he wasn't badly injured, just a pretty nasty gash in his arm. Needed a hell of a lot of stitches, but other than that, Connor couldn't just leave him there, so he decided to bring him. The blindfold. Precautions, he waved his hand dismissively. I reached over to take the blindfold off. Maggie, don't, Andrew said, grabbing my outstretched hand. Why not? He's probably scared out of his mind, and that blindfold isn't helping. Because he was in Danny's pack. We can't risk him seeing anything. So was I, Andrew. He's in the same boat as me. By your reasoning, I should be chained and blindfolded too. And plus, what's he gonna see that's so important? What harm is there in removing the blindfold? Andrew sighed. All right. I placed my hand on the boy's arm. He tried to pull away, but was stopped by the handcuffs. It's okay, I said. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to take the blindfold off, okay? I reached up to his face and slowly slid the blindfold over his shaggy dark blonde hair. His eyes were shut, his face turned in a terrified grimace, as if preparing for the onslaught of pain. I rubbed his tense shoulder reassuringly. You could open your eyes now. I promise I won't hurt you. His eyes slowly cracked open. That's it. Come on. His eyes turned to me, their steely gray burning with a mix of fear and curiosity. What's your name? I asked. Davo. His eyes wandered all over my face before settling on my eyes. Who are you? My name is Maggie. Where am I? I could hear a slight accent in his voice, but I couldn't name it. In a hospital of sorts. I looked down at his wrists and looked at Andrew meaningfully. No. He could be dangerous. Andrew said, his voice strong. I shot a glare at him. I didn't know this guy, but I knew that if he had been with Danny, his life had been hell. I wasn't going to let him sit here, chained. Davo, can you promise not to hurt anybody or try to run? If you can do that, then I could get the chains removed. He nodded his head. Good. Andrew. No, Maggie. I can't just take his word for it. Well, I can. I've been there, Andrew. You haven't. I looked back into Davo's eyes. I could see a spark of hope in them. He wasn't going to hurt anyone. I could tell. Take the chains off, Andrew. Maggie, Take the chains off. I interrupted. Fine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. Davo rubbed his raw wrists when Andrew had finished unlocking them. Come on, Davo. I held out my hand to help him up. Let's get you something to eat. You must be hungry. He smiled and took my hand, swinging his legs over the small cot standing up. I walked with him to the kitchen, and were trailing behind us, his eyes glued on Davo. I opened one of the many refrigerators and pulled out some sliced cheese and butter. Andrew, where's the bread? A skillet and a spatula. I listed the things I needed to make grilled cheese sandwiches. The bread's in that drawer, and we pointed to a large drawer next to the refrigerators. I'll get the other stuff. I opened the drawer to find crackers, loaves of bread, pretzels, hot dog buns, and other bread-like things. I pulled an already open loaf of bread out and went to the table. Turned the stove on low and put the skillet on, and get me 3 plates. Andrew followed my orders without question. He handed me 4 white plastic plates, and I began to spread butter on the bread and put cheese on them. Once I had the sandwiches prepared, I took them over to the skillet and placed them on the hot metal. I took the spatula from Andrew and pressed on the bread, making the butter hiss. So Davo, I said, looking away from my sandwiches, what's your story? He looked down. I used to live in Australia with my mum and my dad, but we moved here for my dad's business about 4 years ago. We've moved all around the US since then. But anyway, I was walking home one night and was jumped by Danny and his crew. He looked up at me with sad, knowing eyes. If you've been with Danny, you know the rest. I nodded and flashed an empathetic smile at him. Why didn't you run after the fight when Annie left without you? And Drew asked, suspicion clear in his voice. I shot a glare at him. No matter how much I had missed him, he had no reason or right to be so callous towards Davo. I knew what he had been through. He didn't need Andrew looking at him like he was ready to bite his head off. I figured that you'd either help me, just leave me there, or kill me. Option 1 obviously was the preferred one and seems to be the one you took. He looked at Andrew with an unsure yet hopeful look. The second one didn't really matter, 'cause I could have just left after you did the third. Well, it was a better option than going back with them. I bit my lip, knowing full well what he meant. The sandwiches now had an even brown toasting on either side of the bread. I scooped them up with the spatula and placed one on each plate. I handed 1 plate to Andrew, 1 to Davo, who looked at it hungrily, and kept 1 for myself. I bit into my sandwich, my mouth watering. Andrew and Davo did the same. Thanks, mumbled Davo between bites. Yeah, thanks, Nags, said Andrew, already having finished half of his. The sky was beginning to darken and the rejoicing and grieving people were beginning to venture inside. Most went up to their rooms while others went to the rec room to play pool or to just sit in the couches. I couldn't help but yawn. I was just so tired. There was so much to take in, plus the fact that I barely slept last night didn't help. You should head to bed, Max. You've had a long couple of days, Andrew informed me. Tell me about it. But where's Davo going to sleep? Well, there's an opening in the room across from yours, I think. I'll have to check, but if there aren't any, he can sleep on the couches. Okay, well, you to play nice. I'm going to bed. Night, Mags. Edward pulled me in for a hug. Night, Andrew. Night, Davo. I waved goodbye as I left the kitchen. Good night. Davo called after me. I slyly grabbed a scissors that was sitting on the counter on my way out of the kitchen. The stairs all but flew under my feet as I ran up them and into my new room. I plopped down on the bed and rested my elbows on my knees, letting my head fall into my hands. Connor had told me so much today, answered so many questions, and yet so many went unanswered. I knew Danny was a psychopath. That's Spidey, my sated mate. Lights flashed around me and my wrist spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. He really wanted to kill off the entire human race. Why? Was he just that power crazy or what? I sat up and took my long unruly hair in my hand. I opened the scissors and held them unsurely over my hair. As the handle squeezed, I could hear the sharp blades cutting through the fragile tendrils. Locks of my hair fell to the ground as I continued to chop off the mats and broken ends until my hair barely touched my shoulders. The cuts were uneven and my hair would probably look like a porcupine in the morning, but I just couldn't care less. I put the hair in the trash can by the door and threw the scissors under my bed before lying down. I sighed and rolled onto my stomach, placing my hands under my pillow. My world used to be so simple. Horrible, but simple. The only thing I had to worry about was dodging my father's fists and making sure I had his dinner ready on time. Now everything was so confusing. I was feeling 1,000 different emotions at once. Some new, and some that I had buried deep in my heart and were now being uncovered to attack my already troubled mind. I was happy that I had found Andrew. I was scared because of Danny. I was sad and hurt because of Jason's betrayal. Confused about how the world could have possibly been so oblivious to this. Angry because of that, among other things. I had been so numb for so long. I blocked every emotion out because her dominated over any other one I could scrounge up, and there was nothing I could do to remedy the situation. All I could do was hurt, so I blocked it all out. I had kept myself neutral for so long that with this bombardment of emotions it was so hard to keep my heart from exploding out of my chest. So many things didn't make sense. I wished I could just close my eyes and my life would all be a bad dream. That my mom was alive and my father wasn't an abusive pig. That Andrew had never disappeared and I had never been taken by those lunatics. I wished my life could be simpler. For the biggest problem in my life to be what to wear to the next party, and whether to get drunk at said party with the wine coolers or the beer. But no, I had to be a freak among freaks that were in a secret war with each other. Sometimes I envy the girls in those cheesy teen soap operas. The moonlight shone through the open window into my still open eyes. The soft snoring of Ellie under her blankets and the floorboards creaking under my feet were the only sounds to break the night as I stood. I walked quietly over to the window, the cool night air soothing my lungs as I breathed deep. I hadn't slept a wink that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Annie, Gage, or Jason looking back at me with evil, vindictive glares. I pulled my wings to my sides as I stepped onto the windowsill. I jumped from the room and snapped my wings out, feeling the wind catch under them and lift me up into the night sky. My eyelids slipped closed as my wings flapped up, down, the rhythm lulling my mind into a serene calmness as I soared higher and higher. I opened my eyes and stared at the ground below. A figure, sitting on the ground with his head on his knees, caught my eye. I silently swooped down behind the figure, letting my wings retract into my back as I walked over to him. "Hello?" I asked. The figure tensed and jumped to attention, spinning in a circle to face me. Davo relaxed when he recognized my face. "Hey, Maddie." He cocked his head sideways in confusion. "What happened to your hair?" I sat on the ground and motioned for him to sit as well. I cut it. The length was annoying me. He nodded and sat beside me. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. "Nope. That couch is not as comfortable as it looks." He chuckled. "It was just so awkward, you know. It just was too weird after months of sleeping on the ground. I'll get used to it eventually, I suppose. If they let me stay, that is." He trailed off. "Of course they'll let you stay. Davo. Or they'll have me to deal with." I nudged him with my shoulder. He laughed. "Well, thanks for the offer. But if they don't want me here, well, I guess I could always try to find my parents." His lips turned in a bitter, sweet smile. "Tell me about them." "Well, My dad is a contractor and we have to move a lot because the company he works for sends him all over the world to head the jobs of building hospitals and big things like that. He's kind of strict, but he loves to have a good laugh or play a game of baseball in the backyard. He's one of those dads who takes their kids out to play catch every day and gets them into every sport possible. You know, my mom is an artist. My dad makes enough money that she doesn't have to work, so she mostly stays home and paints or sculpts. I had the coolest room as a kid thanks to her. She painted a mural on each wall and I had a million other paintings hanging up. He smiled at the memory. Since we moved around a lot, I didn't have many friends, so my mom and dad and I were real close. I could talk to them about anything. God, they're probably so worried. I can't even think about my mom's reaction to me just disappearing into thin air. Then why didn't you go straight back to them after the fight? Why didn't you run home? Because for all I know, they could be on the other side of the country by now. Maybe even in a different country. And plus, how the hell am I supposed to explain to them where I've been or what I've become? How do I know they wouldn't freaking send me to some Area 51 place? I mean, I love them and they love me, but how exactly are you supposed to deal with your only son being a werewolf? He threw his hands in the air in exasperation. I'm sure they'd still love you. I put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Thanks. So what about your parents? You miss them. Well, I miss my mom, but I've been missing her for a while now. She died when I was 13. And my dad? Well, I don't miss him. Let's just say he gave me enough reminders of him to last me a lifetime. I scoffed, yeah. A lot of black and blue reminders. I'm sorry, Maggie. He looked at me with sympathetic eyes. It seems like I had been getting a lot of that lately. He didn't say anything else, as if he knew not to press the matter further. I was grateful for that. I shrugged. It's okay. I'm away from him now. Right. We both stared at the crescent moon, letting the soft chirps of the crickets be the only thing to break the silence. After a long while of listening to the chorus of nature, I got an idea. Hey, Davo, I asked, turning to him. Yeah. I stood and looked down at him with a sly smile. Want a race? I wiggled my eyebrows up and down. Hell yeah. He cheered, jumping up okay. I looked into the forest and located where the river cut through the trees. To the river and back. You're on, he said, getting into a runner's crouch. All right. Ready, set. I crouched down, ready to take off as fast as I could. Go Werewolf Forest, Chapter 14. I win. I yelled. No, you didn't. You cheated. Did not. Yeah, you did. You tricked me. How was that not cheating? Because you never said I couldn't. We never established rules. You can't break the rules if there aren't any in the first place. Davo sighed in defeat. Well, I did win 2 races, he said. Yeah, but I won 3. Oh, shut up. Pixie. He smirked at me. Pixie, I asked, confused. Your hair, he explained. It makes you look like a fairy. I just thought Pixie was a better name than fairy. Go ahead. Check. He gestured towards a puddle at the base of a tree. I knelt down and looked in the puddle. I guess I kinda do look like a fairy. My brown hair was sticking out in all directions. And even spikes covered my head like a round pinnacle with a part at the top. Actually, it kind of looks. Cool, I smiled. Y'all keep telling yourself that, Pine, Cone, Head. If you could stick your tongue out at yourself, I would have. Come on. Let's head back, Davo said, taking me out of my thoughts. All right. I followed him back through the forest towards the house. Morning was now beginning to brim on the horizon. The deep blue hues of the night sky were being pushed away by the pink and yellow glow of the waking sun. The birds were beginning to wake up as well, their chirping melodies welcoming the new day. We walked side by side in silence. The huge house became visible well before we broke through the tree line into the small clearing. As we were walking towards the house, pushing and shoving each other like small children on a playground, I saw Enru burst through the doors, a panicked expression glued on his face. He looked around frantically before his eyes locked with mine. His face softened with relief. "Maggie," he called as he ran up to me and crushed me in a hug. "Andrew." Losing air. I squeaked. Sorry. He muttered as he relaxed his hold on me but still kept me encased in his arms. "What's the matter, Andrew?" He pulled back and looked at me with a face not of relief, but anger. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" He threw his arms in the air. "I went into your room this morning and you weren't there. That's what's the matter. You could have been kidnapped for all I knew. And you." He turned on Davo. "What are you doing out here with her?" He glared at Davo, his fists clenching and unclenching nervously. "Geez, Andrew, calm down." I couldn't sleep, so I decided to go for a run, and as it turns out Davo was up to, so we raced a couple of times. No big deal. Andrew had always been like an older brother, the overprotectiveness included, but this was a little over the top. "Why didn't you leave a note?" he asked, his breathing beginning to slow. "I didn't know you would get so worked up. Sorry." He took a deep breath and pulled me in for a gentler, less bone-crushing hug. "Just don't scare me like that again, okay?" He mumbled into my hair. "I just got you back. I don't want to lose you again." "I know. I'm sorry." He pulled away and really looked at me, his forehead scrunching in confusion. "What did you do to your hair?" Andrew slipped the cards in his pocket after we had finished our 4th round of gin rummy. "He won all of them. He always was better at card games. Want to go for a walk?" he asked. "Sure," I said, following him towards the woods. We walked in silence for a while before he stopped and turned to me. "Hey, Mags," he said in a nervous whisper. When I disappeared. What did my parents do?" He looked at me with hopeful eyes, but I could see in them that he was scared of the answer. "Do you want me to lie and make you feel better? Or tell you the truth?" I bit my lip. He took a deep breath before replying. "The truth. Well, pretty much nothing. They came back from London or wherever they were at, told the police a few things, then they left. Last I heard they were on a cruise liner headed to Italy. Andrew's parents were very, very rich and they liked to go on a lot of vacations. Vacations that didn't include their only son." I looked down at the ground. I didn't want to see his face, didn't want to see the hope that I had just smashed with my stories of hurt and betrayal. I heard him breath in sharply, trying to hold back sobs. "I'm sorry, Andrew." I wrapped my arms around him and buried my face in his chest. He hugged me back and held on as tight as he could. "I'm all right. It's just. I mean, I should have known. Should have expected. I just thought that maybe. I just hoped. You know." I nodded my head. He took my hand in his and we began to walk through the trees again. I could see the pain on his face, though he refused to voice it. I knew he needed something to take his mind off of it. The question that had been biting at the back of my mind suddenly burst the surface of my mouth. "What's a life, mate?" I asked. He looked down and blushed. It's when two werewolves are mated for life. You see, when two werewolves sleep with each other for the first time, they are then mated for life. They can never love another person, ever. The love that they felt for one another, in that moment, is multiplied 10-fold and frozen into absolute permanency. They will always feel that way about each other, and nothing, not even death, can change it. Wait, the first time they slept. Oh no. Does that mean Jason? My heartbeat began to rise and my breathing increased. I could feel little sweat beads begin to form on my now clammy forehead. You, well, what if, say, hypothetically, one of them was, forced into it. My voice was shaky and I had a hard time keeping my hands still. There was a scream of pure agony building in my chest. I can't be mated to Jason for life, no. No, I can't with that. No, please, no. As if answering my prayers, Andrew said, "No, then the bond wouldn't work." "Remember, I said that the love they were feeling for each other in that moment is frozen." "Well, it works the same for other emotions too. If someone hated the other person, then that too would be set in stone. That person would hate the other person forever and never be able to forgive them." I released a breath I didn't even know I was holding. I took deep, steady breaths, not wanting to pass out. So what if it wasn't the first time for someone? Like if they had done that before becoming a werewolf? What then? Would it still work? Yup. It only works for the first time you have consensual sex that you become a werewolf. Oh, was all I could say. It was a good thing I had a tendency to ask questions just for the sake of asking them, and that Andrew knew this. Anyone else would have become suspicious. Then I remembered that girl. The one whose life mate had died. She looked like she was in indescribable pain when Connor told her. Now I understood. She could never love again. There was no way to get over it. To move on. She would hurt like that for the rest of her life and never be able to find love again. Poor girl. Andrew stopped dead in his tracks. "Hold up," he said, putting his arm out to stop me. He cocked his head to the side, as if trying to hear something better. "Connor wants to talk with me and some of the higher-ups. Come on." He turned back towards the house and I turned to follow him. I didn't hear anything. "You wouldn't have." He thought it not said it. He shrugged as if it was nothing special. Whoa. Hold on there a sec." I stopped. Thought it. "Since when did you become a mind reader?" "Since I joined this pack." Everyone in this pack can talk to each other through our minds. Remember when we said that we could fight better than Annie's pack? Well, that's one reason why. Better communication. He smiled and tapped his temple. So what? You can just read each other's minds whenever you want. I'm starting to like this place more and more. Well, not exactly. We can send out messages and receive them, but we can't intrude on what someone is thinking without them sending it to us. It's actually pretty useful. So can I do that? I asked, a little excited. No, you have to be an official pack member to do that. And how, exactly, do I become an official pack member? You have to get approval by all the leaders. Who are the leaders? I asked, now very interested on our current topic. Connor, Danander, Cameron, Eli, Sasha, and me. Well, that's this part of the pack anyway. If you were in a different branch in this pack, you would have to get approval from the leaders of that branch and also from Connor and me, since he's the alpha and I'm second in command of the whole pack. You're second in command of the entire pack, as in the pack that has branches all over the world. My eyes widened as I looked at his face. Andrew, the Andrew I knew growing up. The Andrew whose biggest responsibility was telling the cook what to make, was second in command of a world-wide pack. Yep, but don't worry. I only use my powers for good. He smirked at me before turning and walking again. I rolled my eyes and followed him. When we reached the house, Connor was there waiting for him. Meetings in the wreck. Maddox Brady, my fated mate. Lights splashed around me and my room spun with the beat of Beverly techno music the DJ was playing. He said, and we nodded and headed inside with me following behind. He turned to me as we got to the room. Mags, this is a meeting of the higher-ups of the pack. I looked at him blankly even though I understood what he meant. I just felt like being difficult. As in not you, he said slowly. Well, fine if that's how it's going to be, I said, feigning hurt. Oh, shut up and go make yourself a sandwich. He smiled at me. Yeah, I'm going. He ruffled my hair as I left for the kitchen. I opened the gargantuan refrigerator but found nothing to my liking. I then spotted a basket of apples on the counter. I snatched one up and took a bite. As I was chewing, I began to hear voices. We need to talk about Maggie, I heard Connor say. What about her? Asked Andrew. Well, a lot. Andrew, do you think she would fight? I don't know, but I won't let her, that's for sure. Andrew, think about it. She's in de nouveau deuce. She's our only chance to beat James. You know that. She trained with him, she might be able to kill him. That maybe, but I won't let her face them again. She's broken enough. Come on, Andrew. We need her to fight. This is the human race we're talking about. Don't you think millions of people are worth more in the long run than your little girlfriend's feelings? I didn't recognize this particular girl's voice, but I knew I didn't like her. How would you feel if you had went through what she did? Andrew's voice was rising with his anger. How she feels doesn't matter. These are lives we're talking about, Andrew. A lot of lives. You want to sacrifice all those lives just because it'll emotionally scar this girl. They were both yelling incomprehensible things to each other now, their voices combining into one loud roar. Hey, cut it out, you two, ordered Connor. He sighed and lowered his voice. Andrew, see reason. Maybe if you talk to her, she'll come around. We need her. She's our only hope. They were right. Even with my limited abilities, I had the biggest advantage over James. I was their only hope. Some hope that was. What are you thinking about? Andrew's voice snapped me back to reality. We were sitting in the courtyard, staring at the clouds through the frame of trees. Since yesterday when I heard Connor and the rest of the higher-ups talking, I couldn't keep my mind off it. I had been zoning out all the time, not hearing people when they would talk to me. How the hell could I beat James? The guy was like a freaking fighting machine. And plus, he was able to take control of your body. That was a problem. What was I supposed to do? Convince him not to use his powers. It was impossible to beat him. Just that the sky is pretty today, I said. Liar. He smirked at me. I sighed. He could always tell when I was lying. It's just, I heard you guys talking yesterday. I looked down, hoping he wouldn't get mad. Oh, you heard that? He said a little nervous, yeah. I just don't think I can beat him, Andrew. I know I have the greatest advantage, but even then it's next to nothing. Well, hell, I admit he's a good fighter. But you trained with him. You know his moves. No, it's not that. Did he not know? When's the last time you fought him? I don't know. Maybe a year. Year and a half. Well, I guess his powers have grown since then. Andrew, he can control people, take over their bodies, make them do or say anything he wants. I can't beat that. Enriz's eyes widened. Are you serious? But I joke about this. Shit. He muttered as his face drained with worry. I've got to go tell Connor. Stay here, okay? He got up and left without waiting for my response. Just then Davo came stumbling out of the woods, laughing his head off. What's so funny? I called. He looked up at me and smiled. Oh, hey, Pixie. Are you going to call me Pixie all the time? I asked. Yup, he said, popping the key. Wonderful, I said sarcastically. Now tell me, what's so funny? I fought a bear, he yelled. You what? I stood up. I fought a bear, a big OL grizzly, and I didn't even shift. And not just that, I scared the crap out of these hunters. It was so hilarious. You should have seen their faces when I dodged their bullets. He looked so proud of himself. You idiot. I pushed him in the arm and laughed with him. Hey, no pushing. He shoved me back playfully. Oh yeah. And what are you going to do about it? I poked him in the chest. That's Spidey, I said, Nate. Lights flashed around me and my wrist on with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. He talked me to the ground, hey. I yelled, kicking him off of me. I pounced at him and we rolled around on the ground, each trying to best the other. No sooner had we broken apart than he lunged at me. For a brief moment, everything seemed to go in slow motion. As he was in the air, flying toward me, I felt a pressure in my ears. The pressure grew as if something was trying to escape from inside my head. The pressure built and built until my head ached. Then my ears popped, like they do when you descend down a mountain quickly, and the pressure seemed to escape somehow. I looked around me and saw a strange haze, like the ripples you see over asphalt on a hot summer day. My attention turned back to Davo, his arms stretched out, ready to grab me. And for one moment the whole world was silent. Then time seemed to break through the barrier that had once held it in place again. Davo smacked into the strange haze and was catapulted backwards. Sounds bombarded me, the chirps of birds, running water, heartbeats of many people, and Davo's grunt and cry of surprise when he crashed against whatever force was now surrounding me. He lay on the ground, propping himself up on his elbows as he stared at me with complete utter. I started with the same at the haze around me. I stood and the strange force moved with me. I couldn't touch it. It would just move around my hand, conforming to its shape. Interesting. I then realized that I could control the odd haze. I could feel it, like another limb. I could bend it. My Spidey, my fated mate. Lights flashed around me and my wounds spun with the heavy techno music the DJ was playing, and shape it into anything. I experimented by making it hug close to my body. It conformed to my figure perfectly, like a bodysuit of impenetrable energy. I stood up and walked over to a tree, wanting to try something. I reached my hand, coated with the haze, out toward the tree. As I pressed my hand to the bark, a crouching sound could be heard. I pushed my hand harder, and with almost no effort at all, my hand broke through the tree, as if it were a hot knife and the tree only butter. I then remembered back to when I was still in Danny's camp, the day before I was shipped off to James. Danny had said that Amuvo had other powers too. I had experienced these powers firsthand when I had spent those excruciatingly long days with James. Danny said that the powers were unpredictable, that they could come at any time. My powers were beginning to develop. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us yet. Thank you all for joining me in the wild world of Wild Werewolf. I hope you had an amazing time. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments and likes, and come back for more wild adventures. See you next time.